So I created this fun little title sequence and I thought I'd share with you how I've made it. So here we have the animation playing in Blender, but before we get to the animation we need to set up the materials. So let's stop this, create a new scene, make sure it's in cycles, and what we want to do first is just add a text object. And we'll set this to something a bit more interesting. Rotate that on the X so it's standing up, and extrude it to about 7. Yeah, that looks quite long, giving us our distance that we need. And then we need the magic ingredient, which is an empty, which will control the texture coordinates. And we can see that's stuck in the middle there. That's going to be really important in a moment. Switch into the node editor and select one of the materials from the previous scene, and you can see it's already doing something that we want. And although this looks a bit complicated, we can break it down to quite simple steps. So the first is everything is running off the texture coordinate, not of the generated object, not of the UVs of the generated object, but by our empty. So there's a separate empty for each word in the previous scene. This is our new one we've just created. We're going to rotate that around 90 degrees, otherwise it goes left to right instead of back to front. Pass that through a gradient texture, which just creates the gradient for us. Then we map that gradient against this colour ramp, which gives us our nice strong blue, leading into green, yellow and red with lots of tail space. And this goes through an emission shader because we're not using any lamps. And if we jump that to the end, you can see there's our gradient, though it looks a bit odd because it's not matching the right locations, and this is because this text needs to be in the right location in relation to the empty we just created. So you can see the empty there, and now we've moved the text there, we can see the front of the colour ramp matching the texture gradient there. But obviously this is wrong because now this is not taking up the whole of the text that we want. And the easiest way I found to deal with this is to simply scale the empty until we get the distances we want. And obviously because we're using the texture coordinates of the empty, it's affecting directly this. Now, although this doesn't look too bad, I found a number of ways we can make it look a lot better. So the first one is we're going to connect this colour ramp with this transparent going through a limiting colour ramp, and we're going to put in this mix shader. So let's connect that to the output to see the result, and you can see it creates this sort of depth of transparency, and this is because we have the texture coordinates. So everything's going through this gradient texture, which is coming from the texture coordinates of the empty. And the reason I've moved the white and the black close together, you'll see, is it changes the location or the areas affected by the transparency. So remember, this one is creating the factor for mixing this one, which is almost the same, but obviously is the actual transparency. And again, you can see how that's affecting things. And then of course the only bit that's missing is the massive fading out of the tail. And this is the easiest bit because it's just a standard transparent with no colour ramp being used as the factor. Used as the other shader, and then the factor is the easy bit. It's just a standard colour ramp with no changes. It's just the standard distribution which gives us this distributed fade out. And obviously you could move these around to see how it's affected. So that's it for the material. So let's get straight on to the animation, and it's very straightforward. you take the text, you animate it along, in this case, the Y, so starting out of view and then animating in, getting to the point where it goes solid, because that was the bit with no transparency. Nice solid ending there. And then once it's there, you want to do the fade out. Instead of animating it the other way, you instead animate the empty. And as the empty moves the coordinates, the texture and the fade takes that away. So if I just quickly switch back to the original, you can see the 3 words being animated forwards. There we go, 1, 2, 3, and then the empties of each corresponding material being brought forward to do the fading out.